Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New View podcast. My name is Mac.
And my name is Megan.
Come along with us as we dive into the world of competitive Irish dancing and beyond.
Sharing perspectives, developing community, and learning from each other.
We hope you enjoy. Welcome back to New View, everybody. We're super excited to be welcoming back another guest today. Our guest name is Hayley Pereira. She grew up doing Irish dancing, has a long history in Irish dancing herself, but she's now also a certified athletic therapist specializing in injury prevention, management, and rehab. And she also works a lot with Irish dancers, but she has a broad spectrum of experience with lots of different athletes. And we're just super pumped to have her on today to chat with her. It's a really important topic for dancers to just continue to educate themselves about. And I think we're going to learn so much. So we're really excited to have her.
So, Hayley, do you want to get us started and just tell us a bit about your background, whether that's dancing or education, and kind of tell us where you are now?
Absolutely. So I grew up as a competitive Irish dancer as well since I was 7. And I competed like in Western Canada and also in Eastern Canada because we moved when I was a kid. And through that, kind of like a lot of experiences with dancers, I got a lot of injuries and I saw how kind of debilitating that was for myself and other dancers that kind of felt like a gap in that experience. And so that kind of had me pursue athletic therapy as a career because I wanted to be able to give back to athletes and dancers and so on and so forth. So I went to school for kinesiology and then specialized in athletic therapy. And then that's kind of where I am now. So I was lucky to kind of work with a lot of different teams, like a lot of varsity teams, a lot of clinic locations, and kind of get a well rounded perspective. And now I'm focusing more kind of in Irish dancers and being able to give back to that community.
That's so awesome. I mean, I think we can all relate, and I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast has had some form of injury at some point, probably in their dancing career. If you haven't, I'm super pumped for you, but it's so common, like, from ankle sprains all the way to really serious hip problems and everything in between. And I think as dancers, that can just be so, so challenging when you're in the middle of an injury and you feel like you're trying everything and it's just so frustrating, like not being able to do what you want to do. And so resources like this are just, I think, incredibly important. And just also like the prevention side of it too, I think is really, really important. I'm kind of curious, Haley, how do you feel like what's your perspective on how dancers should be training outside of dance and outside of the studio to support their performance and also, yeah, like prevent injuries?
I think the really important part about that often gets missed is kind of having a why behind everything you're doing. We're so lucky now that there's so many practitioners, a lot of us being Irish dancers, who want to give back to the community, want to be like strength and conditioning coaches and nutritionists and so on and so forth. And it's really great that people want to invest in those opportunities, but sometimes we forget why we're investing. We go to a strength coach and we don't necessarily have a goal. And then so we're kind of throwing everything at us, and that really encourages burnout. And so when you don't have kind of an algorithm as to what you're doing and you're doing so much, you kind of tend to overwhelm your body. And then that actually predisposes you to more injuries. So you really have good intentions in that you're like, I want to be strong so that I don't get hurt. And I want to have a good diet and make sure I'm implementing it correctly so that I reach my goals. But then we do so many things without a why behind everything, right? So say we're dancing 3 4 days a week and then we're going home and we're practicing for a couple hours and we're going to the gym and strength training for 4 days a week, and we're really not putting in a time for recovery. And I think as dancers we really tend to guilt ourselves about recovery, and we feel bad when we're not doing something. We should always be doing more, and it's hard with our schedules. Like, dance is a very young sport, so we have school and we have a lot of other things too, so it's easy to go to bed late and wake up early, and we think that recovery has to be this passive thing where we do nothing and we feel bad about it because we think, oh, another dancer's doing more than me. But in reality, there's a lot of active recovery that we should really be doing, right? And that's, I think, the balance that you have to navigate to make sure that you reach those goals and you have a reason behind each part of the puzzle that you're putting in without just overwhelming yourself and turning into burnout. And once you reach that competition, you really have nothing left to give, and that's not the state that we want to be in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective, especially like you said, dance is a young sport. And
Yeah.
when kids are kind of managing it themselves, of course, we are more prone to, throwing ourselves all in and just trying to do everything all at once, which obviously leads to burnout or no progress or injury or whatever. I'm curious what you would say to any dancer, no matter their age. Like, how would you lay the most basic foundation for beginning kind of supporting yourself outside of just training as a dancer? What does that foundation look like, would you say?
I would say the first thing you want to do is recognize kind of your deficits. Like if you're thinking of doing things outside of dance, which obviously is now a big component of the competitive world, you want to see again kind of your why, right? You're like, okay, I think I need to be strength training because I'm not making it through my dances without falling apart, or my flexibility is really bad, or so on and so forth. So you need to have kind of a focus before you want to go to these practitioners because they're really smart, right? And they know how to help you reach your goals. But if you don't have that goal for them, then they're kind of limited in what they can offer you, right? And you're going to get more of that generalization, which is what we already struggle with as dancers a lot of the time, is people not understanding the demands of our sport. So if we really have a goal of what we want to work on, then we can balance that a little bit more. So you're saying, okay, I think realistically I can manage strength training twice a week. So what am I going to work at and how am I going to have that complement my dancing, right? Because if you're strength training and 2 days later you're super super tired and that's the day you have dance class, well then that's not really helping you, right? Because now you're at dance class and you're too tired to accomplish anything. So it's kind of, I think, focusing on what you want from each opportunity that you're going to reach out to and seeing how that fits and trying to implement them maybe one at a time as well is a really, really big part of the puzzle that I think is important. It's great to be ambitious and to want all of the practitioners at once, but if you're piling all of them on top of each other, then you're probably going to get overwhelmed. And your adherence to those programs is going to be so much lower because you're already overwhelmed, right? So I think implementing each one of them at a time with a goal and then saying, okay, what's the next part of the puzzle that I think I'm missing? Then you can really be able to have that balance a lot easier when you're leading up to things.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that is totally unique to each dancer. Do you find that like in as a provider yourself, each case is different? Even hearing you say that, I'm thinking like differences between Mac and I and other dancers I know. We all need different things at each time. And I think we kind of fall into the trap of like, oh, this amazing dancer does this for their routine, so I'm going to do exactly what they do, you know? And while that might provide you with a little bit of help or some interesting resources to learn more about, it's not necessarily positively impacting you, if that makes sense. Do you find that to be the case?
Absolutely, so much so. I think like it's so admirable that we look up to these dancers that are so successful and we want to be them. But at the same time, like we have a tendency to think that it's a copy and paste world, right? Like I think as a young dancer, for me, like Jig, the movie came out, and then everybody started doing what like Brogan and Julio were doing in Jig because they think that's what's going to make me a world champion, right? Or like when I was growing up, it was like the Rocky movies, and people are like drinking raw eggs and jumping and running up and down staircases. And it's because we're like, okay, they did it and they won. So if I do it, I'll win. But it's like, oh, but what needs are you trying to meet right now? Right. And each individual is going to have completely different needs. Like the dancer who you want to be at the same level at, they might have really good stamina and you might not have really good stamina. So you're like, okay, whatever they do is great. But what if that dancer is actually not very good at flexibility and you're fantastic at flexibility, but now you're focusing on flexibility because they're focusing on flexibility and that's not actually your deficit, right? So you need to be able to individualize, sorry, your stuff for yourself as well. And I think the biggest part of that as well that's so unique to our sport is that we have such a subjective sport and everybody has their own style, right? So you need to do whatever is going to complement your style the best and not necessarily the style of another dancer because it really comes down to what your individual performance on that stage is going to offer. And that's not going to have the same effect on your body as it is on somebody else's body or your training and so on and so forth, right? So it's 100% an individualistic game.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder if that goes back a little bit to what you were saying too about like not doing everything all at once, because I would imagine also kind of if you're doing everything all at once, A, like you said, you could just get overwhelmed and burnt out really fast. But at the same time too, like you maybe don't know necessarily like what's effective and what isn't because it's all kind of confounding. Like it's really hard to actually isolate like, oh, this program, like this aspect is really useful for me and like this part's not actually doing anything or this part's actually detrimental, but I don't know that because I'm doing all these different things and it's hard to pinpoint what it is. That's
Absolutely.
yeah, for sure. I guess like in the same vein, a little bit of burnout. I'm so curious about this topic, and I know Megan is too, but like I know periodization is a real thing for a lot of athletes, and like planning out the season is something that's now almost done to a science in a lot of other sports. And I feel like competitive Irish dancing, when you're a dancer who's qualified for the Worlds and the Nationals, and then maybe you're also doing the Great Britains and the All Irelands, it's a weird season. And I'm just curious, like, do you have rules of thumb or tips for how dancers might want to sort of like map out their season?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that standpoint. We definitely have a sport where we don't really get an off season if you're lucky enough to be so successful, right? We really never get that off season. So it's kind of like you're constantly in this survival mode where after the Worlds, you're switching steps, but you're also trying to train for the nationals. And it's kind of like, well, how do I train if I don't know my steps yet? But then by the time you know your steps, you feel like you don't have stamina and you go through this up and down. And again, right, that's when you're out of your routine, you're out of your norm, and you're really susceptible to things like injury. And that's really scary because you already have so much on your plate. And then you also put in those factors as well, right? So I think, again, it's kind of a little common theme is the balance is really important and often the hardest thing to figure out. But it's trying to figure out kind of what are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish? And what can I maintain in the meantime instead of just dropping things off? I think we have a tendency to get out of the worlds. We come home and we're like, okay, I'm not going to do anything for a week. And of course, that's warranted and you've earned your rest. But then we get right back into like a 3 hour dance class and we're learning new steps. And that's where we're going to get injured, right? And so I think it's like, okay, I have a week where I can do whatever I want. So I'm going to go for a walk every day and I'm going to make sure that my body's still conditioned, but I'm earning the rest that I need. And I'm going to get more sleep and I'm going to eat the foods that I love, but also make sure that I'm still getting my nutrition. And I think making sure that we don't completely negate certain things when we're trying to take on new ones is really important in those periods of time. So you're trying to get new steps and you're trying to make sure that you're still maintaining your stamina and everything like that. But the new steps are really the focus. So you go home, you're just trying to figure out the steps, right? And you're kind of in this like, I need to know my steps. But then by the time you get to classes, you're like, wow, we haven't trained stamina in a month and I'm dying. And you kind of go from 0 to 100. And that's, I think, the biggest fault that we have for everything is either we're going 100% all the time or we're going 0%. And we don't really have that in between for a lot of things. So I think making sure that you balance things in and out, right? Like as much as your new steps are the focus, like maybe when you come home, do some conditioning for yourself so that you're like, okay, by the time we get back to stamina, I'm still going to be relatively fit enough to do so, but I can focus on my steps in dance class. And again, kind of finding where your deficits are and how you can complement your training and what you're focusing on with those instead of doubling up on everything or completely negating everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to manage. So having those little tricks, I think, is really helpful. And you're totally right in the fact that we're a 0 or 100 type of sport. You're either 100% all in or you're like, oh my gosh, I just need to lay in bed and not do anything. I'm interested to know too what you would say. Mac and I were literally just talking about this. Like, you have, let's say, the All Ireland, and then anywhere between like 4 and 6-ish weeks, the Worlds is right after that. And if you're doing both, obviously you want to have peaked at the All Ireland and then peak again at the Worlds. But as an example, like I would always find myself in a position of, okay, I had a pretty great All Irelands. I peaked there, felt good, had some stuff to keep working on, but generally speaking, performed well. And then I would just come home and go into like survival mode until Worlds and literally just be like, okay, I'm like limping around on my foot because it hurts so bad and I'm so tired, but I just need to like keep up this pattern of what I'm doing because that went well and I just need to like make it these 5 weeks, and like then I'll have time to rest. What would you say to dancers kind of sorting that out? Because I can imagine it's not just something I've experienced, we've all been in that position of just like, okay, I'm walking on what is like a stress fracture and I just got to make it through, or like something is up with my hip, but I can't think about it right now.
Yeah, I think pretty much every dancer is probably experiencing that in some extent, right? And I think again as a sport, we really kind of glamorize the struggle and like the survival that we go through, and it's kind of like if you're not like suffering at the moment, you're not doing enough. And I think we always go into a major kind of with the mindset of like I just have to make it one more week and I just have to get to the end and then I can rest and then I can relax. And I think changing the mindset behind that is really a big part of it. And it's like you can work really hard without constantly being in survival mode, you know? Like I think we need to also work really hard at recovering properly. And that's I think something that we really kind of always say but not really do. We're like, yeah, I know recovery is important, but like you don't understand the demands of my sport, which is fair. Like a lot of people don't understand the demands of our sport, right? And we're always like, if we just make it one more week, it'll be okay. But then with there being so many majors, you're kind of burning out before you even get there. And you don't think that you are because you've convinced yourself that you can just push through. But we need to think of it from the mindset of if I take care of myself right now, when I get there, I'm gonna have so much more capacity to show off, right? And I think it really comes from the mindset of that we don't have to be punishing ourselves in order to earn our results. We still have to have that hard work and dedication, but that doesn't still have to be that mindset of no pain, no gain. And I think that's something that we're so attached to is really being in that survival mode and thinking that that's what earns us those results. And it's the hard work, but it's also having that full compass recovery as well so that when we've worked really hard, we have the capacity to actually get to the finish line. And if we always look at that finish line as like the next major rather than the next goal, then we really never have enough energy to get there, right? So if we our body's like, hey, it's just one more week, you get to the All Irelands, and then you're like, great, I can relax. And you're like, you can't relax actually, because we have to go to the worlds now. And it's like, oh, okay, so that's fine. Like I'll get to the worlds and then I can relax. And your body's very intelligent, right? It's really good at being in survival mode, but it's not good at being in optimal mode. And that's where kind of our take on things is, right? We have to teach our body how to be optimal and not always be in this kind of fighting state to finally survive because eventually it can't sustain that long term, right?
I really love what you just said there. Like, our body's good at being in survival mode. It's not really good at being in optimal mode. I wish that my younger self could have heard that. And I think, Megan, like you kind of hit on it as well. I can't even think of the number of majors I went into that like some injury would spring up 2 weeks before. It was like clockwork. It was predictable. Some niggling thing would spring up the 2 weeks before, and it would be so stressful because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm already nervous, and now like this new injury is here, and now I'm probably not going to dance my best because I'm injured. But I'm curious, and I totally want to go back to like this is that all of this needs to be individualized. But for like dancers who are listening who have that maybe feeling of like, oh, I have to be pushing myself, I can't let up or whatever in the lead up to majors, like let's say the North Americans is the next thing coming up. If you have rules of thumb or maybe like a framework that would help people, maybe even structure like what should your last 2 weeks, 1 week before a major look like in terms of your training?
I think honestly, I can really accredit both my education and also some of my teachers to this. But I was really fortunate to have teachers in like the week leading up that would be like, look, like you've worked really hard already, and you're not going to make the difference between your goal and a different goal in 1 week. You
Hmm.
know? And sometimes I think we train like we do. Like I remember kind of being at the peak of my career, and it was kind of the first time I felt the pressure of not only my goals for myself, but the expectations of other people and what I was going to get. And I was in dance class, like sobbing, like doing one of my rounds, crying, and my teacher stopped me and she was like, "What are you doing? Like, you're in phenomenal shape. You're dancing amazing. There's literally no problem right now. You're completely making this problem in your head." And I think a lot of the times we need to take that step back the week before and say, "Okay, like, what is going to set me up for success right now? And is it going to be stressing myself out both like physically and mentally for the next week? Probably not." And I think we need to get to a point where we're like, "Okay, I've done everything I needed to do. How can I sustain this for the next couple weeks rather than trying to push myself over the edge?" Because honestly, like you said, it's always those things that come up like a couple weeks before. And what's the theme in that, right? Is that we're still pushing ourselves like it's the beginning of training. And that's really the importance, is being like, you need to have a peak in training, and then you need to kind of taper in the sense that you're doing stamina, but not every single day. And you're working on your technique, but not every single day. And you need to, again, I think the common theme here that we've kind of talked about is that balance, right? Is that you need to make sure that you're not like burning out the week before the competition simply because you're scared that you're not going to do enough. And again, to go back to my teacher's credit about that, is she was really good at being like, "What do you need this week? Like, do you need to sleep more? If you need to sleep more, then sleep more. Like, don't feel guilty for giving yourself what you deserve and what you've already worked really hard for, you know? And like, don't be going out and doing all these things in your personal life." Like, I think one thing that really, for like back to back competitions, you stay in a hotel or something and you spend like 3 or 4 hours in the pool and you're exhausted the next day and you're like, "Well, I kind of set myself up for that." I think those are the little things sometimes that we don't really think is being that big of a contribution to our burnout in the weeks leading up, but it's kind of making sure that rest is a large part of that productivity, and being like, "Okay, part of my training is resting before my next day of training." And that's, I think, what's going to kind of set you up for those successful periods of time of not stressing yourself out, because you kind of are in not to blame yourself, but you're kind of causing the injuries in the sense that you're not trusting that you've done enough.
Mhm.
And you really have done so much, and you need to believe in the work that you've already put in yourself and realize that in that last week you're not going to do anything but stress yourself out if you try to push yourself too far, right? Does that
For
make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think if I had it's just so interesting the experience you gain, over the years and whatever. And I think if anything, I can totally relate to what you're saying. Is later on in my dancing career, I started to realize like, oh, I actually am dancing better after I take a couple days off. And that was not, after a super long period of time where I just like kind of danced chill all the time. That would be like
Mhm.
after a period of time where I was really consistent and really on it. And then I'd give my body that little bit of extra break, and I would think, oh, I'm going to come back into the studio after like 2 or 3 days of not dancing and I'm going to be crappy. And it would always be the opposite. Like I'd always feel like totally reinvigorated, energized, and like excited actually to be there. And so I have to admit though, I don't think I ever had the guts, I guess, to like really properly give myself that little bit of extra rest going into like I could never not dance the day before a competition. Like just mentally it would freak me out so much. And Megan, I know you were able to do that. You've done that before competitions where like the day before you wouldn't dance. And I know we're just talking one day, but I think that's food for thought for dancers too. It's like, you know what? Like really put in your work early in your training block or whatever so that you can kind of let that all integrate into your body and your muscles and have that recovery so that you're optimal, not just surviving when you go to point your toe on the world stage or the North American stage or whatever that might be, right?
I think the best thing that you just said for me is that you said you didn't have the guts to give yourself rest. Because I think people don't realize, it's one of those things. I think you know it in the back of your brain, but until someone says it, it doesn't make sense. Because it's really hard to allow yourself to get the rest that you physically need. And
Mhm.
I think that's something we don't understand, right? Because we really tell ourselves that rest is a bad thing and that it's something we need to earn and not something that is a part of the process. And I think I actually noticed more in school when I was kind of burning out mentally, how much an impact not giving myself kind of that leeway would have on my results. And it was like getting to exams and being like, "I know all of this, but I'm so stressed out that I can't accomplish any of it." And it's really hard to kind of connect that, I think, mind and body framework a lot of the time of how much you stress yourself out is going to come out in your dancing. And a lot of the times we self-sabotage, right? Like I'm guilty of that coming up to a competition, knowing that I've done everything. I'm not injured, I'm in great shape, I'm dancing phenomenally, there's no issue, and I'm sitting there freaking out and thinking that that's not going to have an effect on my dancing. And it really does. It has arguably a bigger effect than the training itself. And I think getting to a dance competition and going on stage and being like, wow, I genuinely love dancing and I forgot that that was the whole point,
Mhm.
I would dance 1,000 times better. And then once you click with that, you're like, man, I wish I had the capacity to allow myself this amazing opportunity to just enjoy it, right? And that's ultimately the goal. When we're little, we see the world stage, we want to go to the world stage, and you think of it as this beautiful thing, and then it becomes this really scary thing. And we do that to ourselves. And at the end of the day, you're like, whatever happens today, like if I didn't have fun, it's kind of not worth it, you know?
Mhm.
And so I think having the guts to give ourselves that rest is just the most beautiful way to put it, because you really, it's really the piece that I think most of us are missing, and the fact that we, if we just calm down and we tell our body that it's actually safe, that we've done all the work to get there, the results of that are going to be so much better than if we go into it high strung. And then after the fact, I think I've come out of competitions not even burnt out, but being like, I'm so calm now that I'm actually dancing better than I probably danced a week ago at the competition. And then that seems silly, right?
Yes, totally. Totally.
Yeah, I think we've all had the exact same experience
Yeah,
you're
you're like, why did I just
referencing.
do that on stage a week ago? Like, ugh.
Yeah.
And we wonder where it comes from, even though we know, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? We really do know it. It's somewhere in the back of our mind, but we just kind of ignore it because we're like, no, 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 no. That's not what I'm doing. That's not, it's fine. Everything's fine. And we just convince ourselves of these like fake realities because we're like in that survival mode where nothing really makes sense, right? We're just kind of convincing
Absolutely.
ourselves of what we need to do, and then after you kind of like look at the logic and you're like, "Oh, that was a little crazy. Maybe I shouldn't have done
Yeah.
Yeah,
that."
totally.
I feel like we've touched on some amazing little nuggets in here so far that would make up like such great in-depth episodes. We could talk forever. But I'm wondering, Haley, if you could pick like one or two, maybe even three things that you were like, I just want dancers to know this. Like, this is the message I want to spread in what I do. Do you have like a couple main themes?
If I could think of these, I would say honestly, the biggest one, even just in this conversation that's really stood out to me, is just balance is the most important aspect. Because, like if this is your capacity and you just keep throwing things that are beyond this amount, like you're not going to get everything in the jar, you know? So you need to balance it. You can't put everything, and it's not beneficial if the jar is overflowing, right? So I think balance is a really big one because you can be doing all the right things but not actually doing them in the right way. And you're not doing them in the way that benefits you most. You're just doing it because you think you should do it. And I think that's honestly the biggest takeaway from no matter how you're training, no matter what your goals are, is to make sure that you're balancing everything so that they complement each other and that you're not fighting one another with all these really good efforts that you have. I think the other really, really big theme that's important to me now, especially not being a dancer anymore, but being a practitioner that's like working with dancers and teaching dancers, is that we are so fortunate to be a part of a community of another generation that grew up to see these deficits in Irish dancing. And they have now become the people that you can go to who get it. They understand your sport. And I wish I had that when I was a dancer. I wish I didn't have to explain the demands of my sport or explain that I can't wear a knee brace on the world stage because that's not capable in my sport and all those different things, right? And I think it's so amazing that we have all these individuals now that are willing to work collaboratively and offer those opportunities, and that they're really so accessible, especially with like things like this, like a podcast and with Instagram and all these different ways that we can talk to these people all over the world in our very small but very big community. And I think make sure that you kind of, reach out to those individuals and look at the things that they're offering, and make sure that you're individualizing those offers as well, right? And you're not generalizing because of what those other dancers tend to take on or what they think is their best. You always need to be looking at what you need for your mindset, and that's really going to set you up for success.
Yeah. I love that. That kind of gave me chills when you said that. Like the next, that's never occurred to me before, but just the like that's like kind of true. There's a lot of amazing resources out there that are people who grew up in Irish dancing and know what Irish dancing is, and then they've gone out to specialize in other areas like sports psychology or athletic therapy or whatever it might be. And that actually is really, really cool to think about, is there's a lot of awesome resources for this next generation. And I think that's just a lovely recognition or something to recognize, I guess. Yeah, I guess just to reiterate too, I think that's one huge thing I've learned from this conversation is it's not a one size fits all type thing. You can't just go sign up for X program and be like, I'm good. And all those programs might be super beneficial, but thinking of it in terms of, okay, what do I individually need? And how do I like get excited about creating your individual plan that like suits you and is going to optimize your experience so that you're not just surviving it. I think that's pretty awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Hilly. This has been such an awesome conversation, and I'm sure a lot of dancers are going to really benefit from it and hopefully be inspired to kind of delve into this aspect of their training a little bit more. But it's been so awesome having you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be able to talk about both like my profession and Irish dancing with people that understand the same things in the way that I grew up in the world that I've been involved in, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for joining us in this episode of the New View podcast. We hope you enjoyed.
If you have any ideas about future guests we should interview or want to connect, you can find us on Instagram at newview.collective or email us at newviewcollective.mm@gmail.com.